Hi, I'm the Octopus Lady, you're watching Alien Ocean, and let's talk about brittle stars today, shall we? Yeah, look at these guys. Little eldritch horror monsters, right? Those spiraling, branching arms reaching out blindly into the darkness to... do what exactly? Maybe they snatch passing fish out of the water and rend them asunder using all their appendages. Maybe they crawl along the ocean floor, stabbing their arms into the skin and shells of unsuspecting prey and suck the life force out of them. The brittle stars themselves don't even know. They're just running on their most base and primal instincts. A forever moving, forever hunting machine, not spiteful of the life around it, but something much worse. Indifferent. Surely they shall be some of the most terrifying creatures I've ever talked about on my channel, right up there with the vampire and the Magnapinus squid. Longtime fans of my channel know what I'm talking about. Now then, let's get the usual stuff out of the way first. Brittle stars are part of the phylum Echinodermata, and I've talked about other members of this phylum on Alien Ocean before, specifically the sea stars and the sea cucumbers, the former of whom shares the subphylum of Asterozoa with the brittle stars, who are themselves in the class of Ophiuroidea. I think that's how you pronounce it. By the way, friendly reminder, members of Ophiuroidea can be called Ophiuroids, sea urchins and sand dollars are members of Echinoidea and can be called Echinoids, and sea stars are members of Asteroidea and can be called Asteroids. I'm not kidding. I still remember the very first time I did serious academic research into echinoderms because I was so confused why everyone kept talking about rocks in space instead of, these guys. Anyway, there are over 2,000 extant or still living species of brittle stars, which means there are over 2,000 creatures in the ocean that look like this. Actually, oh, you scared me there. Hello. Hi there. I'm a brittle star. Hi, how can I help you? Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't mean to intrude, but most of us don't look like this. You don't? No, most brittle stars don't have the long branching arms. Those belong to a special subset of brittle stars. They're called the basket stars. Most brittle stars basically look like me. Oh. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to disappoint. No, that's not disappointing. I mean, like, as a collective group, you would have been a lot scarier if you all looked like basket stars. But, yeah, no, this is still weird looking. The long, thin arms, that's odd. Yeah. Are you sure you're okay? You just seem really disappointed. No, I'm good. I'm fine, really. Anyway, we gotta move on. We're on a pretty tight schedule. Thanks for stopping by. Anyway, the oldest fossils we have of brittle stars date back to about 470 to 477 million years ago, which makes them a little older than their other echinoderm cousins. Look at that, they're all in a nice little line. That's cute! And for those who are unaware, I asked, not in my last video, but in my video before last, this one, my humpback whale one, I asked if I should get rid of my fossil timeline thing because it's kind of becoming a hot mess, and the overwhelming response was no, keep it. Even when I said, leave a reply if you want it gone, most of the replies were of people saying the exact opposite. So congrats to all you fossil timeline lovers. The hot mess is gonna stay. Some folks suggested that maybe I hire a professional graphic designer to make this actually look presentable, and I think I will do that at some point in the future. But for now, I think I just want the timeline to descend further and further into chaos, and once it's truly the hottest of messes, then I'll hire a professional to clean it up. Because I think that would be really funny. And then finally, brittle stars are found all over the world, from the shallowest shallows to the deepest deeps. And fun fact, apparently, the very first recorded incident of a deep-sea organism getting dragged up to the surface by humans was a brittle star. Back at some point in history, some guy was dredging in some bay because he was trying to find some passage and accidentally yanked some species of brittle star up to the surface. Or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember. This ain't a history channel. One thing that's noticeable about brittle stars is that they're pretty quick moving, especially when compared to many of their echinoderm cousins. Sea stars, sea cucumbers, and sea urchins move using their tube feet, which are these, well, tubes that have suction cups on the end of them that they can extend and retract. And since these little things are the only bits of their body moving them around, it can take them a minute to get from point A to point B. Not so with brittle stars. They just drag themselves across the ground with their arms. And they're remarkably resilient to damage, because even when most of their arms get removed, they'll still keep on hauling as if all their arms were intact. Look him go! Also, don't worry, brittle stars, just like other echinoderms, can grow back body parts without much fuss. This guy is gonna be fine. Brittle stars have even been seen swimming, which is pretty impressive because most echinoderms can't swim without serious changes to their anatomy. For example, sea cucumbers. Most sea cucumbers are benthic. Benthic meaning of, relating to, or occurring at the bottom of a body of water. So they mostly look like this. But there are some sea cucumbers that are pelagic. Pelagic meaning of, relating to, or occurring out in the open ocean. And they look like this. Yeah, they look pretty different from each other, don't they? And sea urchins and sea stars don't even bother with an adult pelagic version of themselves. But brittle stars? They don't have to change anything about their bodies in order to swim around. Look at the hustle on this little man. They also, unsurprisingly, use their arms to eat, but we're gonna come back to that later. Hey y'all, Editing Octopus Lady here. I just want to clarify something really quick. Brittle stars aren't the only echinoderms that can move pretty fast and swim relatively well. Crinoids, or the feather stars, are able to do that too. I completely forgot about them when I was writing my script earlier, so I just want to give them a little shout out. Also, don't worry y'all, these guys are going to get their own episode of Alien Ocean at some point too. Okay, back to the video. Something else that's really unique to brittle stars is that they seem to be the only echinoderm that ends up in symbiotic relationships as what's called the symbiont. And we've talked about symbiosis on my channel before, with dinoflagellates and corals, sea anemones and clownfish, pistol shrimp and goby fish, chemolitho-autotrophic microbes, and a whole bunch of organisms at the deep sea hydrothermal vents. But let's review a few terms really quick. Symbiosis is a close biological relationship between two or more organisms. A symbiont is the organism that lives on or in another organism, and the host is the organism who, well, hosts the symbiont. Here's the thing though, every single example of symbiotic relationships I've previously talked about on this channel have all been examples of mutualism, which is a type of symbiotic relationship where everyone benefits from being in it. But that isn't the only type of symbiosis that exists in nature. There's also parasitism, which is when one participant benefits from the symbiotic relationship while the other is harmed. Yeah, so when a mosquito is sucking on your blood, you are in a symbiotic relationship with it, with you as the host and the mosquito as the symbiont. Fun! Anyway, many echinoderms often play hosts to other organisms, like with this sea cucumber that has a whole fish that lives in its butt. Go check out my sea cucumber video if you want to learn more. But brittle stars seem to be the only group of echinoderms that are pretty consistently the symbionts, and they're often seen living on corals. At first glance, it might look like brittle stars are acting like parasites to the corals as they wrap themselves tightly around the coral's branches, which could potentially smother or injure the polyps. Some large basket stars will even wrap themselves into a tight ball and just sort of hang off of a coral. Meanwhile, living on the coral makes it a lot easier for the brittle star to get access to the food it likes to eat. But again, we're gonna come back to that. And this seems parasitic, like this can't be good for the coral, right? Well, studies show that corals seem to suffer no ill effects when they host a brittle star, but they don't really seem to gain anything either. So this is not an example of parasitism, but of commensalism, which is when two organisms are in a symbiotic relationship and one of them benefits and the other one neither benefits nor is harmed. So for a while there, that was the general consensus. Brittle stars and corals had a commensal symbiotic relationship, until it was discovered that some brittle stars use their arms to remove particles deposited on corals, thus preventing their polyps from being smothered. And then a study came out showing that brittle stars helped protect corals from the adverse effects of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Like, for real! The Deepwater Horizon oil spill, if you aren't familiar with it, was this truly terrible environmental disaster that occurred back in 2010, where an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico exploded, killing 11 workers and ultimately dumping 4 million barrels worth of oil into the ocean over the next 87 days. I could go into much more detail here, but I'm not gonna, cause it is way outside the scope of a video that's supposed to be about brittle stars. But maybe I'll make a video about the Deepwater Horizon oil spill at some point in the future. Anyway, that same year, researchers surveyed a bunch of deep water corals in the Gulf of Mexico that had gotten covered in oil and other nasty chemicals. Some of these corals had brittle stars on them, some of them didn't. And they kept coming back over the next 4 years and found that the deep water corals that had a brittle star on them recovered way more quickly than the corals that didn't, even if the brittle star left at some point during the coral's recovery, like you can see in these pictures. This thing here in the middle is a brittle star. Yeah, all of this belongs to one brittle brittle star. Girl had really long arms. And this photo was taken in 2010, and then here's that same coral in 2011, and then 2014. Look at that! I mean, look especially at where the brittle star was hanging out before it left. Look how good that part is doing. And unfortunately, I do not have photos of any corals who weren't hosting a brittle star, but the paper reports that their recovery wasn't going nearly as well. The researchers didn't actually see much activity happen between the coral and the brittle stars when they were taking these photos, but they hypothesized that given previous studies, the brittle stars used their arms to clean oil and other nasty stuff off of their hosts. Now, to be clear, I think the general consensus is that most coral-brittle star relationships are commensal, but there are some that are clearly mutualistic, and the corals are the ones who are especially benefiting from it. But what about brittle star beds? Y'all ever seen those before? Brittle stars are often found in really dense aggregations, sometimes numbering in the thousands per square meter, and they just blanket themselves across ecosystems, covering everything regardless of whether it's dead or alive. Honestly, the first time I saw this, it reminded me of ant swarms. Not all ants are like this, but I know there are definitely some ant species that if anything wanders into the swarm, it's dead. So this must be similar. The brittle stars must eat or crush or smother all life underneath these mats, right? Well, no. Plenty of animals have been found under these brittle star aggregations, seemingly unaffected by them. And it doesn't seem like it's hard to get them to move out of the way either. Researchers have poked, like literally took their finger and poked at a spot on a brittle star bed, and within like a minute or two, the brittle stars cleared the affected area. There are some ants that will definitely not do that. Brittle stars don't seem to obstruct the movement of other members in their community and will not hesitate to get out the way of their predators, like this sunflower star. There is also evidence that they actually might be beneficial to benthic communities, in a similar way that animals like mussels are. Okay, so mussels, like brittle stars, can completely cover a huge chunk of an ecosystem, but this is typically beneficial to said ecosystem if the mussel population doesn't get too out of control. Mussels can do things like provide protection and shelter for other organisms, and they are a key player in something called benthic-pelagic coupling. Basically, there's a bunch of nutrients and stuff out in the open ocean that would just stay there if it wasn't for things like mussels. They filter the water constantly for food, and any waste products or stuff they don't want to eat get basically spat out by the mussel. That contributes to what's called sediment organic material, which accumulates on the floor of benthic communities and is a food source for other organisms, which means nutrients that were out there are now down here. So you see why it's called benthic-pelagic coupling, right? And there is some research that's been done that indicates brittle stars may share a similar role as mussels. Creatures might hide under brittle star beds to take refuge from predators, and there was a study done in 2017 that showed a positive correlation between brittle star aggregations and sediment organic material. This is just a correlation. The increase in sediment organic material might be for reasons unrelated to brittle stars, but it's enough to at least ask the question, are brittle stars also key players in benthic-pelagic coupling like mussels? More research needs to be done to get a clearer answer to that question, but at the very least, it doesn't seem like brittle star beds are life-destroying blankets of mayhem and chaos, and any similarities to things like ant swarms are purely coincidental. But if brittle stars are coupling the benthic and pelagic, they're doing it through eating, just like mussels. So let's finally talk about how brittle stars eat. And to no one's surprise, they use their arms to do it. Some of them are hunters who actively try to catch their prey, sometimes by just like waving their arms around, but they're mostly hunting small invertebrates, like little worms and crabs and such. Although apparently, one time, they found insects inside of a brittle star's stomach, and they were, quote, probably bees. Which is wild and unexpected, but the point is, they're not going after anything big and fast like fish, unless the fish is already dead, because some brittle stars are scavengers. Some of them are deposit feeders, which is kind of a fancy way to say that they just eat mud. And some of them are suspension feeders. That's when an organism eats things that are suspended in the water above them. Stuff like plankton, both the zoo and the phyto kind, bacteria, and detritus, which is like bits of rotting dead things, and also poop. Yum! This is actually why some brittle stars hang out on corals. It's easier to reach currents when you're on top of something that's arborescent. And you want to get access to some good currents, because that's where all the plankton and stuff are suspended, right? By the way, arborescent is a word I learned while doing research for this video. It means resembling a tree in properties, growth, structure, or appearance, and I think this is the only opportunity that I will ever have in my life to use this word, so I used it. Anyway, suspension feeding is also why basket stars look so extra. Almost all basket stars are suspension feeders. So while their arms look very alien and bizarre and unnatural, they also make really great nets. Like if you hold up arms like this into a current that's full of all your favorite food, you're gonna catch a lot of stuff. Way more stuff than if you have arms that look like this. Although to be clear, there are plenty of brittle stars with arms like this who suspension feed. But let's be real here, between these two, who's more optimized for it? And there's something else cool that they do with their arms. They make them glow. There are a bunch of different species of brittle stars that are bioluminescent, and they seem to be bioluminescent for a bunch of different reasons. One reason being, sometimes just flashing a light at a predator scares them off. You just go like bleh, and they run away, and you don't get eaten. Another reason being aposematism. We've talked about aposematism before with lionfish, but it's basically when an organism uses bright colors or bright lights to signal to a predator, you don't want to eat me. A lot of toxic organisms are aposematic for obvious reasons, but some unpalatable organisms are too, which are organisms that aren't poisonous, just kind of gross. You know, don't taste good. And brittle stars seem pretty unpalatable. There was a study where they took some brittle stars and, ground them up, cut them into cubes, and fed them to crabs. And the crabs didn't really eat the cubes. And I'm pretty sure the crab species they chose for this study are not picky eaters, because that would defeat the purpose of the study. So some brittle stars flash bright colors to basically say to predators, I'm not worth it, man. You're gonna put all this effort into hunting me down and trying to catch me, and when you finally do, you're gonna realize I taste kind of nasty, and it will all have been for naught. So listen to me when I say I'm not worth it. And then the final reason being the burglar alarm hypothesis. Remember this from my dinoflagellates video? Go check it out if you haven't seen it already. The burglar alarm hypothesis basically says that organisms are bioluminescent, not to scare off their predator, but to get the attention of their predator's predator. So if you're a brittle star, and if something starts chewing on you, you can light them up, which will hopefully get the attention of their predator. And then their predator will come over and start chewing on them, allowing you to hopefully get away. So it's like I said in the beginning, brittle stars are about as scary as the Magnopinna squid and the vampire squid. And by that I mean, they aren't scary at all. If you haven't seen my videos about these two, then spoiler alert, despite the fact that these dorks look really creepy, they're so absurdly harmless. It's hilarious how harmless they are. Like this one is about as threatening as a bowl of spaghetti, and this one is about as threatening as a football. Go watch my videos about them. And I do think brittle stars should be inducted into their club, the I look really creepy but I'm actually harmless club. Because at worst, brittle stars are like a chill roommate that you don't even notice is there most of the time if you're a coral, or they're a slight nuisance if you don't want a bunch of them sitting on top of you. And at best, they are actively helping you not die from one of the worst environmental catastrophes in human history. They may feed you and keep you protected from predators, and they can theoretically throw the most literally lit parties with their glowing arms. Brittle stars aren't just harmless, they're heroes. Now, some of you might be a little disappointed that brittle stars aren't as terrifying as they first appear, and I get it. Sometimes you just want a scary looking animal to be scary. For example, the mantid fly, a horrific amalgamation of a praying mantis and a hornet, which Tirzu talks about in detail over on my streaming service, Nebula. Nebula is a prestige streaming platform full of videos that cover a wide range of topics, like politics, art, technology, and of course, science. We got a bunch of science YouTubers over there that you might already be familiar with, like, well, me, of course, but also Nile Red, Chubby Emu, and Tirzu, who has his own Nebula Original series. Nebula Originals, by the way, are videos that are exclusive to Nebula. You can't watch these anywhere else but here, folks. And Tirzu's series is called Let's Play Outside, where he focuses on the adaptations of single animals, like the previously mentioned mantid fly. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with Tirzu, but if you're not, and you like my style of videos, then you'll like Tirzu's. Like, look at this cute little animation when this mantid fly attacks an aphid, and check out this awesome pixel art. And he, of course, goes into detail about all the cool adaptations mantid flies have in order to fight against some of the worst creatures in all of Kingdom Animalia, wasps. So if you'd like to see this exclusive content for yourself, you can sign up using my link, go.nebula.tv/theoctopuslady, or use the link in the description to get 40% off annual plans, which shakes out to about $3 a month. And given that we're in the midst of the holiday season, then may I recommend one of our gift cards. For only $36, you can give your friends and family a 1-year subscription to Nebula, and don't worry if they're already subscribers. They'll just get a whole nother year of Nebula added to their account balance. So if you're still looking for a last-minute present, use the link gift.nebula.tv/theoctopuslady to give the gift of Nebula to your loved ones. And hey, maybe this year, instead of getting into a shouting match with your relatives, you'll instead spend your annual holiday dinner talking with them about mantid flies. Maybe. A girl can dream. Regardless of how you sign up, subscribing to Nebula is a fantastic way to support me and creators like me in creating high-quality and thoughtful videos for you. And with that, thanks for watching another episode of Alien Ocean. And I have a hopefully interesting question for you all. Remember earlier when I said that they found a brittle star that maybe had bees in its stomach? Okay, in the comments, tell me, how did that brittle star manage to eat some bees? And make it fun and silly. Don't be like, oh, the brittle star was probably hanging out in some shallow water and a bee got too close to the water and it drowned and the brittle star ate it. Like, that's not fun. Come up with fun stuff. As always, huge thanks to my patrons. Making these videos takes an incredible amount of time and work. Like, this little part took me at least 6 hours. I had to find all the photos, which can take a surprising amount of time, Photoshop all of them, and edit them into the video. And that's just creating the visuals. Researching and writing adds probably at least another hour or two. And don't get me wrong, I love doing it. It's so satisfying when it all comes together. I know it's not perfect, but I'm so proud of this little section. But the only way I can dedicate 6 to 8 hours of my day to making stuff like this is because this is my full-time job. I clock in and clock out every week doing at least 40 hours of work because I want to make videos that are not just deserving of your attention, but deserving of the support that I get from my patrons. I literally couldn't do this without all of you, and I want to make sure y'all feel like you're getting your money's worth. So if you'd like to help me keep this as my full-time job so I can continue to dedicate entire work days to photoshopping silly pictures of fish for your entertainment and hopefully education, Patreon is the best way to do it. Patreon.com/theoctopuslady. I've linked to it in the description, and depending on which tier you sign up for, you can get early access to my videos and or your name in the beautiful credits. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and come check me out over on Blue Sky, which, oh my god, y'all, it's so much better than Twitter. And until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood octopus lady reminding you that you don't have to go into space to find aliens.